Audio check. Cool. All right, I think we're good to go.
Get back there. Alrighty, welcome to track 2 for Dakotacon this year. We have up here Jordan Arndt with Cerulean Cyber Consulting. Sorry. He's an alumni from Dakota State with a master's degree. Please take it away, Jordan.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone. First off, thank you to Dakotacon for having us out here this year, both as a vendor and as a speaker. I appreciate them satiating my request to be involved more with the community here. Like I said, my name is Jordan Arndt. I am a DSU alum and current adjunct instructor at Dakota State University. I am the founder of Cerulean Cyber Consulting, which is a small boutique cybersecurity consulting firm out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I have 10 years in MSP experience from a previous life when I was, just from a previous life, and I have 3 years of incident response and VE CISO experience here kind of through the course of this business. I'll be talking to you guys about some of the horror stories from the last couple of years that we've seen here at Cerulean Cyber Consulting and how we've helped manage some incidents and BECs and that kind of stuff throughout our life here. So we'll get right into it. We're talking about 3 different incidents today. 3 different organizations, 3 different lessons, right? There's going to be kind of a cohesive theme to today's talk of we'll try to stitch together a cohesive theme together, I guess. I'm not going to spoil it for you right at the start here, but we'll try to stitch it together. So the first story we're going to be talking about is the nonprofit organization. This is an organization that didn't really have a lot of IT or security infrastructure in place at the time when an attack hit. The second one we'll be talking about is a manufacturing company based out of South Dakota. This manufacturing company got hit with a pretty nasty strain of ransomware. They were protected and they were, or at least they thought they were ready for a ransomware attack at the time of the attack. So we'll talk about that attack and the differences between, or the gap between what they expected and what they actually received in terms of an attack. And then story 3, the CEO of SaaS. That is named as a double entendre. This CEO is a little bit sassy towards me, so that's kind of partly why I have this story in here. The other reason is it doesn't take 6 phishing attempts to secure your email solution, right? So that's going to be our third story of the day, is figuring out what exactly is happening in our email solutions and why they are so prevalent, especially for SaaS companies, as attack vectors, right? Couple of things before we jump into it. This is going to be a little bit of an interactive presentation given the group size that we have here and given the stories that we're going to be talking about and the faces in this room. It's going to be stories that either directly affect you or directly relate to you in some way. So I will be asking some questions throughout. Don't be afraid to shoot up your hand. We have mics flowing around the room so people can give responses to my questions and everything else like that. With that said, let's just get right into it. Oh yeah, and these are all real, by the way. They're all anonymized incidents from South Dakota organizations. So don't feel like there's going to be confidential information or anything like that given out. I went through great pains of anonymizing all of this information. So, all right, story 1, the nonprofit. It's Friday night in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is a community services organization that's kind of servicing the local area, right? Like all nonprofits in South Dakota, they have no CISO, they have no managed IT environment, right? They really don't have any IT manager on staff. There's no security program in place, none of it, right? These are often the first thing overlooked when budgets are tight and leadership's focused on mission delivery, right? And as we know, what happened in the last couple of years with nonprofits, that their budgets are now completely different from what they were a couple of years ago, right? More likely it's less than what it was a couple of years ago. Their backup system was set up years ago by an IT contractor who had since left the organization. No one tested a restore. And do you think, audience members, do you think that he gave the credentials to those backups to the new IT company? No, he did not. No, he did not. So we'll figure out why that was an issue for this particular organization in the ransomware situation. So it's Friday night, a phishing email arrives on Friday night, someone clicks the link. This is an organization that's continuing services into Saturday and Sunday, so they do have a weekend staff coming in over Saturday, right? What do we think happened next? Seriously, what do we think happened next? Because phishing email lands on Saturday, you know this is a talk about ransomware. We know the ransomware is gonna hit, right? Why? How bad do we think it's gonna be? Anyone? Pretty bad, right? I mean, it's gonna be pretty bad. I just described to you an environment that doesn't have a lot or any controls in place, right? There's a phishing email that hits on Friday night, someone clicks on it. Saturday morning, every screen shows a ransom note, right? Every single screen in the building shows a ransom note. I'm not even kidding. These guys have Windows XP machines running their CNC routers in the shop, right? Even these machines are showing the ransom note. So ransomware was deployed overnight while no one was watching. Threat actors deliberately target Friday nights and holiday weekends because they know response will be delayed, right? I don't want to work a Friday night any more than the rest of you do. And the attackers know that, so they're going to try to exploit that to the best of their knowledge. So, what was encrypted? File servers, workstations, backups, accounting software. There was actual servicing software that they used to actually design specific builds, right, that were affected. There was, and I'm not kidding when I say this, there was nothing left at this organization. It was 100% encrypted. There was not a single piece of data that was left untouched by the malicious actors by their ransomware encryption, right? So, everything's encrypted. The CEO doesn't even know how much, or the president doesn't even know how much PTO the receptionist has, right? 6-figure ransom hits the door with the ransom note. Community nonprofit, they do not generate profit. Now, if these actors are in the systems deploying ransomware, what do we think that they have intimate knowledge of? Besides their IT systems. Their finances, right? So when I say something like there was a 6-figure ransom demand against a community services organization, do you think that the attackers knew that the amount that they were setting before they said it, or do you think that they just set some arbitrary number? They 100% knew the number that they were setting, right? I mean, they have intimate knowledge of your accounting and financial resources and are very aware of what you are able to pay and what you are not able to pay, right? All right, next slide is going to be kind of what was seen at the level of encryption on the Onion site, right? So this isn't actually the ransom note. This is the ransomware portal that you would go and log into using the credentials left on the ransomware note, right? There isn't much protein here for you to digest other than this is what the ransom note looks like, right? Just a note, this group is known as Quilin. It's also known as Keelin, I think, from my notes. Excuse my Midwest pronunciation. Either Keelin or Keelin. These actors are very prevalent today, right? They are a ransomware as a service group that emerged in 2022. They're targeting all types of different organizations, including the nonprofit ones we're talking about today, right? This is a professional criminal operation. They're very good at what they do, and this particular instance continued to prove that. Because I've gotten some questions about it in the past. Any questions about the ransomware note? I know that there's not a lot of people that have seen a screen like this on an Onion site before, so I usually get a couple questions here. No? Cool. All right, we'll keep going. Okay, so the first question that we have to ask with story number 1 is where are the backups, right? We talked a little bit about backups and how the former IT employee left, didn't really hand off any of the encryption keys or anything else like that, right? So we're called in on Sunday morning with the IT team. The first priority we have is, okay, we're going to restore from backups, right? At the time of the event, we didn't actually know that there was already a layer of encryption over the backups that we didn't set up, right? Or that the IT company didn't set up, right? Like I said, there was a previous IT contractor that had set this up and had never given the company in question the keys, right? he was unreachable, it was years ago, nobody knew that the backups were encrypted or that the keys were even needed in the first place, right? So the second layer of encryption on top of that is going to be the ransomware, right? The ransomware encrypted the same backup files that were already encrypted, right? We spent the entire night on Sunday, well, pretty much Sunday through Monday morning. We spent the entire time trying to decrypt and get this data from backups without knowing that it was first encrypted by the IT provider that was before us, right? So it ended up being a big red herring that we all wasted 24 hours on anyway, right? But the point of it is if I'm that company and I'm that organization, did I just spend 24 hours of incident response time for 4 distinguished professionals, which is probably going to run me, you know, a 5-figure sum? Yeah, right? That's exactly what I did by not documenting the backup keys, right? And on top of that, you delayed the restore process because we just spent 24 hours digging at backups that we couldn't get at. So, final note here is your backups are only as good as your ability to restore them, right? If we're not restoring from backups, testing our process to restore from backups, then we're not able to accurately assess the effectiveness of those backups. So just highlighting the 3 failures again. So there was no importance on IT. Again, if you're a nonprofit organization, I hear you. I know your pain. I know it's hard to dedicate spend on IT and security. The one thing I will challenge you on, however, is that it is not a nice to have. It's a must have, right? That's kind of my perspective, obviously, as the educator here at Dakota State. But you know, I think that there is no amount of budget cuts that could ever tell me that my organization can't be secure anymore, right? I mean, I think that has to be priority number 1. Number 2, mismanagement of information inside managed systems, right? We talked a little bit about how that IT backup was mismanaged through previous employees. And then 3, untested and accessible backups. Again, we have no process to test these backups, right? We don't have anything to say that, yes, these backups are working regularly and we can rely on them in the situation of an emergency. Questions there? Cool. So kind of tying it all up, what did the ransomware scenario cost, right? What was the eventual downtime cost, monetary cost of this particular organizational hack, right? So there was 5 days of no services from this company up until Saturday to whatever that day was, either Wednesday or Thursday. There was no services from that company at that time, right? Now, they chose not to pay a ransom, right? Mostly because this was going to be a PR nightmare for a community organization in the dead middle of the United States. It's just not something that's even feasible. But even after months of recovery, the organization never got back to where they were 100%, right? They would never truly have all of that data back because they didn't pay the ransom, because they didn't make an attempt to get the data back, because they didn't have another copy of it. It was just gone forever, right? So over a course of 3 to 4 months, they now had to spend rebuilding those systems, restoring data from scratch, and reestablishing systems wherever possible, right? Again, 4 months later, the CEO or the president still never had an idea of how much PTO the receptionist had on that day. Cool. After living through all that, what do you think changed at the nonprofit? Total data loss, all-night recovery efforts. I know that's more of a pain point for me than the leadership of the nonprofit, but what do you think changed? Oh, excuse me. Anyone? Hopefully someone knows the backup passwords now, right? Yeah, I think that was a good change that they made. I can tell you for sure that someone's got a handle on the backups now. After losing everything, the only change that they made was hiring a break-fix IT provider, right? There's no incident response in place. There is no disaster recovery protocol in place. There's no MDM in place. There's no AV solution in place. There's no EDR SIM solution in place. None of it, right? The only change that they made was, hey, our computers break sometimes. We might need an hourly guy to come and help with that, right? Okay, well, At this point in time, you're going to see me standing up here rolling my eyes a little bit because I, for the life of me, can't understand why these types of decisions are made, right? Obviously, I wouldn't be standing up here if I did. Yeah, so don't be like them. Don't be like those guys. Story number 2, the manufacturer. This one had a security team, had an IT team, had a security team, had all the products, all the bells and whistles you would expect a multi-million-dollar manufacturing company in Sioux Falls to have, right? Over 2,500 endpoints with over 3,500 inboxes, is very flushed out corporate structure, right? However, the security team decided that they were going to do vulnerability testing, which is, again, a very neat thing to do in a corporate environment. So over the course of that testing, they had identified 2 vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities, in which they brought to leadership. The fixes to these vulnerabilities were new hardware, which if you're a business leader or owner, you know that new hardware isn't exactly an inexpensive cost, right? Leadership chose not to act at the time, leading to the next situation that we're talking about, right? So the 2 flags that were raised to leadership. SSL VPN appliance had known published vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities, right? Not a 0-day, documented, publicly known vulnerability that was on their radar but not prioritized for patching. And I don't know how critical vulnerabilities don't get prioritized for patching, but that's another lecture for another day. Their endpoint platform module was inadequate, right? So they had identified that the EDR in place could actually be disabled with local administrator credentials, which I don't even know how it classifies as an EDR after that, because that just seems like you're able to right-click, run as administrator, and turn it off. But you know, that vulnerability was there. They identified it. The security team identified it, pushed it up to the IT team. The IT team pushed it up to the IT leadership, and the IT leadership pushed it up to the management leadership, at which time the management leadership said, you know, we're paying $2.50 an endpoint for this AV solution. We might as well keep it, huh? Yeah, but there's this vulnerability. What if we get saved? Oh, they'll never get in. It's not going to happen, right? What do you think happened? There's the ransom note. Does anyone recognize this ransom note, by the way, before I reveal to you who it is? We were just talking about it in one of the previous sessions over on the other track. This is a Black Basta ransom note. So I wasn't able to actually determine if these were Black Basta actors or if they were Black Basta impersonators at the time, but this was the ransom note that was left on the manufacturer systems at the time of the attack. Notice the attackers warned against hiring recovery companies or incident response companies like myself, right? It's just all there to scare you, right? It's words in a text file. It's bytes in a text file. It doesn't mean anything. Because the irony is the recovery team is exactly what saved the organization from paying in the first place, right? So also, I like to point out that last line. Awaiting you in a chat. We are waiting for you in a chat. It just says waiting you in a chat. Like that was going to scare someone out of anything. Bad grammar has never scared anyone, by the way. So we talked about, let me go back a slide here. We talked about the $6,250 that was saved annually from not upgrading to the AV protection, right? The ransomware came in, they had AV, it didn't really do much of anything. It spread through the workstations, it spread through the servers, it got a couple of the backups. However, we were able to restore from backups, thank goodness. Brought them down for a little bit though, and you know, a production company like, or manufacturing company like that, the lines being down means you're losing a lot of money day over day, right? What do you think actually, what do you think this incident accidentally cost them? Accidentally, actually? Several million is a great guess. $3 million. A production downtime, a week and a half. They made the decision. Now, you know, hindsight's 20/20, and I'm not going to tell them that at the time we said, you know, $6,200 versus $3 million, right? Because that wasn't the conversation at the time we talked about this. It was, well, you know, we need to get rid of this AV solution, and it could cost us big in the future, right? It's probably our bad for saying that couldn't be multiple millions of dollars, because that's exactly what it ended up being, right? This is the math of choosing cost over security, right? It doesn't make sense to me to limit your ability to deploy good security products because of the lack of spend you're performing on your IT and security environments, right? Every risk a security team identifies is one that needs to be taken care of. I don't care if you're a business leader, IT director, someone just sitting as a SOC desk engineer. They are in those positions because you trust them to perform security activities, and if we're not listening to them at the end of the day, then what are they even there for? Please listen to your security personnel. The aftermath, the IT and security team, right? Work diligently to contain, recover, detect, all that good stuff. They never ever said, "I told you so," despite having raised a red flag. I continue to work with them because of that second bullet right there. I was very impressed with their professionality through that engagement. Every warning they gave was validated by the breach, right? And they restored operations for backups that are only partially affected. I had mentioned the partially affected backups just a little bit ago. We were able to get them fully recovered from those partial backups, so it was a really, really good thing for them. The boardroom was a little bit awkward. The boardroom was a little bit awkward that week. They were tense. The board meetings that followed were very tense. The IT director sat directly across from the leadership that told him that we couldn't switch out AV solutions not 2 months before the attack, right? And it was probably one of the more tense boardrooms that I've ever been in my life. And the company ultimately invested into a new antivirus platform and a new VPN solution, which helped them with those SSL tunnels and that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, that was kind of the shakeout of story number 2 there. We helped with technical recovery, incident response coordination. We also were doing some federal authority liaison and cyber insurance stuff for them as well, and we ended up advising them not to pay the ransom, obviously, because we got them fully recovered from the partial backups. Thing to learn from this: when our security team raises flags using the products that we pay for, when our employees that we pay using the products that we pay for identify things, we should listen to those things, especially when they're critical vulnerabilities. Story number 3, hopefully a shorter one to end it off here. This is kind of a different kind of vulnerability. This is going to be a SaaS startup looking to kind of break into the federal government tech space, right? We were engaged as their fractional CISO compliance GRC work. We were doing some access control and some IT work as well in their MDM environments, and helping with some security program developments. Security tools were in place. We were in there providing guidance, but the person at the top refused to be part of the solution, right? So what was the vulnerability? What do you think the vulnerability was based on that description? Yeah. Software vulnerability? CEO? Phishing, social engineering? In 1 year, the CEO got phished 5 times. And after the first time, we were like, man, you really shouldn't have the keys to the kingdom. We know it's your company, it's your baby, but you can't be a global administrator in Office 365. Sorry, you just got phished. Well, it's my company, I need to be an Office 365 administrator. Okay, well, sounds good. Got phished a second time. All right, well, seriously, you can't be an administrator anymore. Well, it's my company, I'll do whatever I want. Okay, sounds good. After time number 3, or after that second time, the question didn't become, hey, let's take you out of privileged groups. It became, why aren't you preventing this as a security team, right? Why aren't you preventing this as an IT team, right? Well, I can offer to train you and educate you on, some of the red flags in a phishing email or something to that effect. We could even do a SIM solution for monitoring Office 365 intrusions. It's about $8,500 a month. We could do something like that, right? That's okay, we'll just keep going. Fished a 4th time as the global administrators group. Same conversation, right? Why didn't you prevent this? What is going on? What exactly is happening? Why isn't the email being secured? Did you click on another phishing email? Yes, I did. Okay, well then that's why it's not being secured, right? The 5th time this happened, $10,000 worth of wire fraud, right? Money, there was a BC attack on that same CEO. They got in, they changed a couple of wire numbers, they ended up getting $10,000 from an invoice, and the question once again became, why were we attacked, right? After the fifth and final incident and the $10,000 wire fraud, the CEO asked again, why didn't you prevent this? This is kind of a funny slide. I kind of like it. SIM solutions, and I don't mean this to be a slight against the SIM solutions of the world today, but SIM solutions are very highly priced. They're a premium product with a premium price tag, and they, as such, charge things like $8,500 a month, right? Now, this proactive Office 365 monitoring SIM solution would have prevented this specific attack, costing us $10,000, but it would have been a difference of about $1,500 that month in terms of cost, right? That one solution would have cost as much as one wire fraud per month, and that's exactly what we ended up saying, right? And that was kind of the flipping point. That was kind of the, oh, I get it now, right? Well, so that's why we need to practice. That's why we need to educate ourselves on what the red flags are in these phishing emails, right? Otherwise, we can't accurately understand the threats that face us and the threats that are going to be hitting our inbox nearly every month, more if we click on all the emails all the time. So the 4 takeaways from these 3 situations that I've talked about, right? 1, we're testing our backups. I'm assuming, I was going to make number 1, prioritize IT and security, but I feel like saying that in 2026 might be a little bit gratuitous, so I'm just going to say test your backups, right? We need to have good backup testing, restore from backup processes, right? If you cannot restore from backups today, you do not have backups. Sorry, that's how it works. If your backups can't do the one thing they're functionally supposed to be doing, and you don't know that they're able to do that today sitting in this room, then you don't have backups. Second, listen to your security team, right? When they raise a flag, act on it. There's a reason you're paying these security personnel to be the security personnel that they are. They're not just there to fill a role. So $6,200 decision turned into a $3 million decision in losses, right? From our story number 2. Third is security is a leadership problem at the end of the day, right? If the person at the top is not participating in the security culture, no amount of technology will save the organization, right? A $10,000 SIM solution isn't going to save you from getting phished, especially if you've been phished 4 times before that month or that year. And lastly, have a plan before you need one, right? Know who to call, know what the first 24 hours is going to look like, perform your tabletops, understand what your roles are, right? If you don't understand what your first 24 hours of an incident or ransomware is going to look like, then we need to get into a room and plan that out, or you need to get in a room and plan that out with your staff, right? Because that can't be a surprise to anyone, and it makes the process a lot easier for the incident responders of today when we have plans in place. Cool. That was my last slide for today. Threats are closer to home than you think. I ask you to stay prepared, stay diligent, make sure your backups are what you think they are. You are more than welcome to come visit our booth right out there. Make sure to take some merch on your way out the door. I will be at the booth for the rest of the day. Come and talk to me about some of these situations. And I really, really appreciate you guys coming in and listening to me today. And let me know if you have any questions or anything else like that. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
So in about 30-ish minutes. So if you guys are interested in learning about the development of the CyberConquest competition, come back at about 2. Thank you.
Test.
Test.
Alrighty, welcome back to track 2 over here for next talk. We have 2 master's graduates up here who came back to help out with the DakotaConquest Cyber Conquest competition. They're doing vulnerability research in their respective fields and just came back to help and organize an event for you guys. So please take it away, Gaelin and Tristan.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to DakotaConquest, which is our subtle rebranding of a competition we've had here at DSU.
Yeah. So, is my mic on? There it is. Now it's on.
Hi, I'm Tristan Sabert. I'm a Master's of Computer Science graduate from just December. I'm doing vulnerability research in Oak Ridge area. I'm a book nerd and a lifelong learner and kind of a bit of a walking, talking Linux man page. So if you love Linux as much as I do, feel free to connect. We'd love to hear more.
Hi, I'm Gaelin. I graduated with a Master's in Cyber Defense in 2023, and I currently work as a vulnerability researcher in Ohio. And I enjoy tinkering, breaking things, playing with hardware, software, doing fun stuff like that, and climbing plastic rocks in my free time. So the main inspiration for this competition was DEF CON. My first year at DEF CON was 2022, and seeing some of the ICS Village stuff and some of the physical components and stuff there, where stuff actually moved, was pretty cool. So I was inspired to build something with physical services, and gave us a nice chance to break away from some of the school grind and have fun building some stuff. Staying up too late, banging PWM. More on that in a sec. Yeah, and so later that year is when we actually started the process of building this competition that is DakotaConquest Cyber Conquest.
So Cyber Conquest, as our school knows it, is a purple team competition. It's kind of the midpoint between cyber pen testing competition like CPTC and a defensive competition, CCDC, where in CPTC, your only goal is trying to break things. You're hacking into things, and you're scored simply off of your red team points. In CCDC, you're doing the opposite. You're getting hacked, you're trying to actively defend all these different attacks to your enterprise network, keep things online, and we have really enjoyed kind of putting together a competition that meets in the middle. You're not only given an enterprise network and some physical services that we've come up with, but you're trying to keep them up and defend them against all the hackers, as well as getting a chance to test your skills on various websites and interfaces we've designed, and hack into other people's and see different interactions occur. Over the course of the past few years, we've slowly accrued a team of dedicated volunteers to help us scale out this competition into what it is today. Year 1, we had kind of a challenging start because it was only Gaelin and I and 2 of our friends, Julian and Brandon, and every year since, we've been able to have a few more people come on board and help us make it into what it is today.
So yeah, let's talk about that year 1 R&D. So from DEF CON's inspiration, I already had an addiction to ordering stuff online from Adafruit and DigiKey, so I continued doing that, ordered some fun random parts and played around with them. You can see some little tinkering there. And yeah, so I had a couple things. We had some rough services. We got some people to come help solder a bunch of boards. Had a nice soldering night. That was fun. And eventually we started growing and getting a couple more people. In December, I started building kind of a team to do this, which led to some fun moments.
Yeah, so around, I think it was November era that year that Gaelin tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, I have an idea. Let's build a competition. I'm like, okay, we built competitions before. I'm like, what's the difference with this one? He's like, well, this time I have motors and things that spin and blink. And I was like, okay. I don't know anything about this, so we were on our way to Minneapolis for a competition, and we had 4.5 hours in a 12-person van just to soundboard ideas off for a while and kind of come up with what we are showing here is the rough proof of concepts later, and then build them out into logical systems.
So I mentioned earlier bit banging PWM. So what is PWM? So PWM, pulse width modulation. You have a wire that turns on and off really quickly to like vary the speed of a motor. And normally this is done with like MOSFETs or something. You can kind of see on there, there's like, if you have the wire all the way off, the motor doesn't move. If it's all the way on, the motor moves fast. So we were having a little bit of fun, and we did it with relays. Does volume work? I don't think volume works, but let's see. Oh, you can barely hear it. So this is PWM, but with some relays.
I don't think that works. Somehow we didn't cook any relays in the process, but we had some
Well,
fun.
not at this stage.
Not at this stage, we'll say.
Yeah, it just sounds like my speaker's malfunctioning a little bit, but yeah, so anyways, so we had a lot of fun doing stuff like that. But let's go a little bit more serious. So what did we do for year one? We had 3 main services. So windmill, water tower, and a traffic light. Let's break into some of those a little bit.
So first, we started with a windmill. It was really simple, rudimentary. We knew we had a motor, and it wouldn't be too hard to get the motor to spin and control the different flows, whether we're spinning it to the right, to the left, and do different things based off that. We had toyed around with relays before and understood some of the circuitry in trying to reverse the polarity, and while the wiring wasn't too hard for an initial proof of concept, on the right, you can kind of see the windmills that we actually produced. There were multiple stages and iterations of trying to come up with a design, and you can see that the blades are kind of 3D printed to look like a windmill, but the bases are what more looks like a kindergarten craft project. And that's okay, because surprisingly, those are some of the most structurally sound things we have in our whole competition that year. That year was kind of rough, given a tight time constraint, a small dev team, and not a lot of time to put these things together in a way that looked nice. Plastic cups and popsicle sticks hold up very well. Whereas in the few iterations we had for the 3D print, one of the blades was too aerodynamic and flew off. We had a few that cracked too easily, and finally landed on what we see here today.
So it's all fun to like play around with relays and stuff. We have 3 relays here that allows us to flip the direction that the motor's going, and there's also one relay in there for a disconnect so that we don't just like make the motor jerk one direction really fast to the other. But dang, it's almost like, if only there was like a good way to do this, like something that was built to, I don't know, control motors, like, I don't know, a motor controller hat, which we learned later. Actually, the best and funniest part is that in this little video from before where we're bit banging this PWM jank, this right here is actually the motor controller hat that we had not considered using at this point. So
Research and development, always
Yeah.
a fun time.
anyways, windmills. So then I was like, water. Water's fun. Mixing water and electronics is fun, right? So I really wanted to do something with water. So we built this cute little water tower thing. It just fills up a little cup, super rudimentary, super simple, has a little water sensor on it that'll tell the program to kill the motor when it fills up. And of course, you get the fun thing of if you leave the motor running or your system fails, then it just spills water everywhere, which is great. That's why it's in a little bowl. And also great opportunity to learn about things like peristaltic pumps. Like, that's kind of cool, if you know what that is. Pump that moves water in a quirky way.
And finally, we had a bunch of LEDs and we were trying to figure out what to do with them. So kind of in the middle, you can see we have a really simple strip. Those are just 8 pixel strips that came together, and we fashioned a bit of a 3D printed tower and got it to look like a traffic light. Really simple. And well, traffic lights need some sort of thing to influence, so playing around with long LED strips and figuring out how to make blinky lights do cool things, a day or so of testing later, and we had a highway that could wrap around our city with the traffic controllers trying to impact where the traffic would stop and when. The wiring was really simple for this. We just managed a USB breakout board and wired it up to the pixels themselves. However, there's a few hiccups with the year one launch, and a lot of good lessons learned. For one, we're working with a very small team of really just 4 dedicated people and a lot of missing sleep to try and pull this all together. There was no real development plan. We kind of just YOLO'd it. We were given a bunch of fun things to play around with and trying to make something bigger out of it. And we learned a lot through that. So making sure that consistency in deployments is a big thing, especially when you're trying to scale. And coming from it with very little experience, we didn't know that as clearly as we do now that we have 4 years under our belts, with tomorrow being the 4th. So that is something that we learned the hard way. Another thing we learned the hard way, not once but twice, is do not buy the cheapest things off Amazon. Year one, we bought a dime a dozen relay, and they would always give out at the most inconvenient times. Something would flip it, and it just would never flip back. We didn't know why. So that second lesson we learned is don't buy the cheapest cables either. Reliability is a price worth paying, and if you're trying to manage something with long duration uptimes, it's usually worth paying a little bit more to guarantee that things will stay on. With 1 year of experience under our belt, we learned a lot about this competition. We learned what people really liked. We learned a lot that could be better, and more importantly, we learned that this is something people enjoyed doing because it gave them an experience they couldn't really find elsewhere. With about 5 hours of sleep and a late start, it was a fun day overall. We had a lot of teams sign up, and people enjoyed the competition.
Yeah, I mean, we must have done something right. You might see, kind of hard to see, but there's a bunch of smiley faces on everyone there. I mean, everyone must have loved it. But wait, remember that service I talked about, water towers? Well, that's a bucket with a few gallons of water in it. That's enterprise-grade networking gear. What could possibly go wrong? Luckily, nothing actually did go wrong.
Thankfully.
But we had a few close enough calls that the more reasonable people on our admin team decided to not do that again.
Ever.
So year two.
Year two, we had this experience of what went well, what went poorly, and what we need to do better. So we went in, and a lot of the development went into small batch testing of services. We designed a crane. We built this crane harness through several iterations of testing. So even though it's driven by software, the hardware has some fail-safes that if the software fails and things break, it broke in a predictable fashion. It was very easy for us as the managers of the competition, put it all back together, everybody could have fun playing things, and when people hacked the crane, they could maybe see it explode. It was great. Now, testing-wise, we tested this for short duration tests. 30 minutes, maybe an hour tops. We had all these different teams working, and we were like, great. We figured out like how to build the harnesses better, how to design the software to be more stable until people tampered with it. And we built it all up the night before, and we're going to bed, we're waking up the next day, letting people in the door, everybody's taking their seats, and within an hour of the competition starting, we have a string fraying. Somehow, we had overlooked the fact that little bits of friction over time, given many hours of rubbing back and forth, are going to start breaking things down in ways we couldn't see or predict beforehand. So that was kind of a hard lesson we learned that year, and thankfully there were plenty of backups on hand to just replace the string, get everything up and going.
So year two, we have a city. We started a lot earlier and more organized. We had more people helping us. We actually had an admin team instead of just like me on not a lot of sleep. And we had some confidence that it had already been done and could already be done. We actually had set design team. We had people, thanks Sophie, that actually built stuff for the set instead of just building electronics and then being like, it'll look cool, right? So much better than season one. However, There were a couple fun improvements. We added improved traffic lights. You might be able to see there's like one hanging off the building there instead of just like that little 3D printed stand. We actually had crashes happen, so like if two light cars ran into each other, there was a crash that happened instead of them just like passing through each other and acting like nothing happened. And we added that crane. It was great.
It was a lot of fun.
We had more consistent theming as well, which was, kind of nice. So, year 3. Year 3, we had this wonderful idea for a wireless service. We were going to have Pi using something called RPiTX, ignore the space in there, which is where we have a Raspberry Pi. We stick a single wire onto one of the GPIO pins. We run this program on it, and it transmits wireless signals that you can catch and see, and it's great. It worked great in testing. We were able to send POCSAG pager messages from the Pi to the scoring engine and back. We had this whole fun thing where you could do like command injection in that, so you could send a pager message with a bash command in it, and it would run that bash command. You could hack systems via sending a pager message, kind of sick. However, we started hitting problems when we ran more than one of these. Because it turns out, if you have 10 devices that are not designed to be transmitting wireless signals, all transmitting wireless signals in a super jank way, you start to get a whole lot of interference and just some weird problems happening. I do not understand RF enough to know what exactly was happening, but we'd have weird problems like instead of giving one clear signal, it would just raise the noise floor. We're like, what? The Pi worked in every other way. We just have some Pis that the hardware just would not transmit properly. We could not get a clean signal, and I spent at least 20 hours during our building week working on this, along with a couple other people, taking up a ton of time, spending a ton of time trying to figure out this service, and then we ended up scrapping it at 3 a.m. on the Friday we were building out because we just could not realistically get it up and scoring.
So if year 2 went so well, we kind of went into year 3 with the confidence that it was just bound to go just as good. Or so we thought. And quietly, that confidence led to some poor execution during the development sessions, and more importantly, a loss of time in our highly constrained setup day time frame. When we started realizing these things a little late and had not properly tested these things out early, we realized that another challenge that we were facing was we just didn't have clear enough plans well in advance to ensure that if we were experiencing these problems, we could change tactics before the big push week to get it all together. So sometimes the hard lessons are the ones that stick with you the most, and we knew that moving forward, something had to be done to address this. But on the bright side, we were able to pull it all together. We featured a CCDC style scoreboard so everybody could see if their services were up, down, if they were hacked and somebody had persistence on their box. We had an LCD little screen that acted like a billboard that you could display messages on in our city. And we also had a little drawbridge that we added to run across the highway. So, had some fun things to add, even despite the bad things happening. And we walked away from that year trying to think, how do we go and grow from this? There's a lot of good things that can happen and will happen as long as we avoid doing what we did before. So how are the hour-long stand-ups going in our current approach, and what can we do to make them better and not get so sidetracked in the plenty of time we had that led to just us in a crunch time? So what we learned is a few clear lessons of change. One, better structured meetings to emphasize work and less of updates. Prior years, we had just had everybody working on things kind of asynchronously. We would come together, everybody would let us know of like whether a new feature's been added or if things are integrating well. And instead of doing work, we were just talking a lot. That started to showcase in year 3's issues that we did not have the testing. We did not have things integrating as well because there weren't these synchronous working meetings to ensure that tasks were getting done by deadlines. Secondly, when there's less time invested in big planning meetings, there can be more time invested in the R&D. Given the situation that happened with wireless and all the time that got sunk into that, if we would have had more time actually doing that before that last week, we would have realized that maybe some of the Pis just didn't have the hardware compatible to approach this. And without working meeting structures, that just wasn't there. Another thing was that dev groups were not as coherent. We had a lot of people that found something interesting to do for 5 minutes. They would come, they would give their input, they would add some lines of code, and then they would bounce. And now we have 7 different people that added one little line contribution to a script, but nobody authoritatively knows how this service runs until one of us sits down, rereads all the code, figures out the wiring, and goes from there. So if we build better dev teams, now we have points of contact with authoritative understanding of how a system works. When it's breaking, we can call on them, they can look it over, and instead of 7 people's times being taken to review something, we only have 1 person fixing things, which is great. And lastly, with all this improved structure, we can now have better deadlines and prototyping to ensure that we can declaratively say this is go or no go early and save ourselves the stress.
And also as a quick note here, like all of this is volunteer. So we can't be like, hey, you gotta get it done, you gotta get it done. Like people just won't show up if we're mean to them or if we put too much pressure on them. So we, like having a meeting where every week we're like, all right, here's an hour-long stand-up of what happened. Like people are working on this in their free time. They worked on it maybe 20 minutes over the weekend or maybe an hour over the weekend. So having an hour-long stand-up of what is everything that you did over the last week, like that's just not useful at all. So this year, what do we have tomorrow? We have some fun stuff tomorrow. So we have an NFC service, similar to your ID card, which is a fun way to ship data around the city using NFC tags. Team clients will place an order for something, and then it will be written to an NFC tag, transported somewhere else, and then read. That'll be fun. We have radios, this time tested a lot more, and in a way that probably will not just have as much interference, hopefully. But literally FM radios, like we can literally play audio on FM radio, which is going to be fun. We have servos with PWM done correctly with little boards that actually do PWM. We have custom PCBs. This is a really fun new addition this year. Actually taking time to design some custom PCBs to save us a bunch of headaches in dev time. And trains. We have trains this year. We got a bunch of model trains. Yes, we convinced Kyle to buy us a bunch of model trains for this that we could lay out and actually have moving components that not just move like back and forth, but like drive around in a circle. There's a relay you can flip that'll make the train just go off a different way. Kind of fun. And also, that's what the NFC tag is stuck to. So let's talk about those custom PCBs for a sec. Custom PCBs are really fun to make. They are surprisingly easy. You do need some background in electrical engineering, but if you have plugged an LED into a breadboard before, or like made an LED turn on, made a motor spin, that's basically all you need to know to build a custom PCB. It takes, a little bit to learn how to use the software, but it is surprisingly simple if you have a little bit of understanding of how electricity works and how breadboards work. Also, it's not as expensive as you might think. Building these, well, it did take a couple of hours. Really not too much. Well, let's look at that. Like, building this big board here, granted, it's a relatively simple circuit. It's just connecting some wires, but they're like 12 bucks each, components, everything done. Fabrication's only 40 cents each. Costs 40 cents per board to get a little board printed. Like, that is cheap. These other ones, they're smaller, they're a lot cheaper, and we actually paid for some assembly services because we couldn't find those components for cheaper elsewhere in the quantities we needed. And like even the assembly was like $2.50. It is surprisingly cheap, and it is 100% worth spending $5 on a little board than troubleshooting it for hours and hours on end when you have that board where it has a bunch of little wires plugged in there and someone bumps it, one of the wires gets unplugged, a chip starts literally melting plastic because it gets so hot. No one knows what's wrong. Oh, and also, look at all those jumpers coming off of there. That's just to score one team. 4 wires coming off to score one team. If we have 10 teams, that's 40 jumpers into the same breadboard. That is a complete mess. Versus this way, we have these two nice little boards. They connect over just a standard Cat5 cable. And we have a chip on the team side that actually runs GPIO pins for them. We can connect like 4 things up there. We run a Cat5 cable over to the Pi, and then we can control it from a Pi. Such a simpler method and has a lot less failure conditions than a breadboard. But might be cheap. There is one small caveat here. You know those tariffs. So we are ordering this all online from China. This is a picture of one of the bills we got. So you can see the total there, $45 on fabrication. That's not too bad. We got a bunch of boards printed. Shipping charge, $48. That already doubles our order price just in shipping. Then that $20 in custom duties and taxes, that's tariffs. So while tariffs might not have that much effect on prices, like a couple cents here and there, they're actually quite a large amount on some of the semiconductors that we use. And taxes, of course. So that brought a $45 order up to $122. Kind of crazy. But yeah, overall, surprisingly fun, easy, and not too expensive. Really fun to do. Definitely recommend it. But overall, so we're running this competition. We've been doing this a couple years. Why though? Like, why are we doing this? Why not? It's neat, fun, I was bored. But really, why though?
In reality, a lot of fun things have kind of come from this. First of all, it's a genuinely rewarding experience for everybody involved in putting it together because it's a great way to get hands-on with projects. For anybody who doesn't have maybe the interest or time to get started on their very own and figure it all out, coming together as a team where somebody else might know how breadboards work and how wiring diagrams are designed and the flow so that when somebody coming from a solely software background is approaching hardware and it's all new to them, there's somebody to mentor. And with that, it's just neat to work with friends and like-minded people with a similar goal and just learn from them. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned by working together towards a goal. The time to learn these new concepts like basic circuitry has given a lot of people valuable skills to put towards their own projects that they can do outside of this competition. And another thing is just all of this learning is something that they take with them, not just in this competition and building it up, but where they go next, where they might apply for work, what skills they need down the road. And with all this, it becomes a very rewarding experience to be involved. Secondly, there's been a lot of positive feedback from everybody who's competed and just been involved externally. The competitors have always enjoyed this different flavor competition because when you're approaching some of the traditional competitions like CCDC, everything is in a virtual sphere. You have a scoreboard and something goes red when something goes down, like an email server is no longer online. You see the red light, you're like, okay, I need to go figure this out. In our competition, when something goes down, your windmill stops. You look up and something's not spinning. Your crane is broken. Why does this happen? Now you have a reason to go threat hunt. So you have a reason to go figure this out. Go invest the time to figure out and understand what it is running in your network and how it is that you need to get it back online. Secondly, for anybody interested in like red teaming, it gave kind of a fun, different flavor to that as well. Because you got to play with something and see your lines of code become something that physically happened. Lights changed, cranes blew up, motors stopped spinning, and all of that is something that you can quickly address and see with your own eyes as you're going along. So the volunteer team has enjoyed a lot of laughs and camaraderie through it all, and honestly, the satisfaction of just seeing it all come together at the end makes it all worth it.
And I mean, also would just note, like, it's fun to have unique competitions. Like CCDC and CPTC are great, but they're like mostly on the computer. I mean, I guess CPTC a little bit less, but still, mostly on the computer, mostly focused on like these just like virtual machines. When you have like an actual physical thing in front of you, it's so much more fun. But yeah, like what's our message? Why do we want to give a presentation? We want to encourage people to do things. Like, just do something. I just kind of like had an idea based on seeing something kind of cool once and was like, what if I did this? And then I did it, and it kind of worked. And I mean, it wasn't beautiful, it wasn't polished. I mean, I don't think any of our years would be quite defined as polished. But we're working on it. We're working on it still. But like, just do something. We had no idea what we're doing. We still have no idea what we're doing. I mean, that was like my second PCB that I've ever built. My first one was a cute little trinket with like 4 LEDs on it for a conference earlier last year. Like, when I first started working with this, I had plugged an LED into a breadboard. That was my entire electronic experience. I mean, I had been on a robotics team, but I was writing software. I was not dealing with motors. I was not dealing with any of the electronic side of it. I was just writing code. And in building this competition, I had to learn, like, oh, when the motor's not spinning, what does that mean? What's actually causing that? Like, yeah, a lack of power, or what else? Like, did we just cook a motor? Why does this relay not close when we stop applying power? Like, why does this relay buzz? All sorts of fun, weird problems like that that I actually had to learn about. Learn about custom PCB design, learn about random protocols like SPI and I2C, PWM, and how to not run that with a relay. So, you know, build stuff. Oh yeah, there's some pictures. Do fun stuff, build stuff, and yeah, learn more. So, year 5+, we gonna run this again?
Where do we go from here? There's a lot that we don't quite know what might come. We all started this when we were all on campus. We were all students, so syncing up, taking this on was a lot easier. We shared campus here. We could find common spaces to work. We were dealing with hardware, and hardware is a lot easier to work with when you can get hands-on with it. But now we're dealing with 3 different time zones. Most of our admin team has graduated. We live in Columbus and Oak Ridge and Washington, and we're all over. And it's just getting harder to manage a team dealing with hardware and design from afar. But
we have some ideas. I mean, there's some ideas. There are some things that we could possibly do. But let's focus on tomorrow first.
First, tomorrow.
So if you're interested, sign up, come compete. It's fun. It'll be fun. We'll have some snacks and a lot of fun. But yeah, anyone have questions? Wanna ask us how things blew up? Wanna hear about our idea for how we're bringing sharks into this competition? We'll have to see about that. That might take a couple hours to figure out. That's how they're going to be scored, yeah.
Photoreceptors.
Awesome. Well, quickly before we go, we just have some acknowledgments to make. I mean, we're the people on stage, but there are a lot of people that helped us. We had a bunch of people help over the last couple of years, and definitely did not put all of the names on this slide.
We tried our best.
Yes, and thanks, Eric, for a lot of network help, and I guess Sean and Cody as well for lending us some supplies. But yeah, thank you all, and sign up and compete tomorrow.
Thank you, Gaelin and Tristan, for that enlightening talk on DakotaConquest. We have a speaker talking about phishing detection on automation for cybersecurity coming up in about another 30 minutes. So come back for that. Thank you. Justin Evanger, he's from North Dakota State IT team, doing automation for cybersecurity. So please take it away, Justin, or Jaden, sorry.
Hey, you're good, you're good. So yeah, like you said, I'm Jaden Evanger, and I'm a senior cybersecurity automation engineer with the state of North Dakota. So I work for an agency called NDIT, North Dakota Information Technology. We're kind of like an MSSP of sorts for pretty much all of the state of North Dakota IT infrastructure for state entities, K-12s, political subdivisions is what we call them. And even a tribal government, we also cover that too. And today we're going to talk about building defense in depth, email security with machine learning. We're really going to hit home on the machine learning part. We're actually going to be doing a live demo today, hopefully it doesn't break, for training a machine learning model for detecting potential phishing emails that come in. So kind of a quick overview of our use case that we have with our SOC with North Dakota is we have users that report emails with the Phish Alert Report button. We have that deployed on all the email clients. So, well, not every single email client, not every single customer has it, but most do. And they're able to report emails that they think are phishing, all right? So that's kind of the first step. Then we have a source solution that looks at that email, and we kind of tie that in with our own custom machine learning that runs on the email text in the subject line. And we also have some other multitude of factors that we take into consideration inside of the SOAR workflow to generate a severity score. We calculate that, like I said, from a multitude of factors. And then we close out the alert for someone reporting that phish. If the threshold is too low, we leave it open for an analyst to look at if the threshold is high or it's above that threshold. So then we also do that with some of our quarantine release requests. And what we do with the state of North Dakota is we've got Microsoft Defender Quarantine. Who's heard of Microsoft Defender Quarantine? Yeah. And you get a little email in your inbox if you've got messages that have been sent to you that have been quarantined by Microsoft. And there's a little button on there that says request release. And we actually tied that process into our SOAR so that our analysts can review if they want to release it or not, right? Because not everything that Defender quarantines is actually bad, and sometimes it doesn't quarantine the stuff that it should. So we don't want to release stuff into the wild that's bad, so we have that review process. And we were able to put some of this machine learning in front of that to auto-deny if that ML thinks it's malicious. We don't auto-release, though, if we don't think it's malicious. We didn't want to quite take that step. So then why do we want machine learning in kind of this workflow? Analysts get a lot of phishing reports from end users. You know, all the users in the state of North Dakota and all the government entities that we support probably eclipses 200,000 people. That may not be the total number of people that, you know, report phishes, but a lot of them do report phishes. And we get, you know, probably 50,000 plus, just off the top of my head here with the metrics, reports per year. But our analysts only work about half of those, about like 25,000 a year. And that's because we have ML auto-closing a lot of these that we believe are not actionable. And yeah, a lot of them are not actionable, so we close them out. Analyst never sees them. That's fantastic. And it saved our analysts a lot of time to go do threat hunting and all this other stuff that they want to do, not look at phish reports. It's kind of a slog, right? And it's a problem that can be classified into one of few, you know, classification types. We use 3 classes Spam, malicious, legit. A lot of people will just use spam or legitimate or malicious or legitimate. So we actually use 3 classes in our classification, not 2. There are benefits and drawbacks to each of those approaches. But ML is really good at, especially when you're dealing with text classification, if you have only a few things that it could be, it's a great application for it. And ML learns what kind of email you usually get, depending on, of course, how you train it, where you're getting the training data. We'll go into that quite a bit during this presentation. And what I love about ML is that it's not entirely reputation-based. A lot of the SOAR workflows that a lot of people build, they check malware, or, well, I shouldn't say just malware, but attachments in emails or links, domains, senders. Are they known bad? Or are they known good? Or do we not know their reputation? That's all threat intelligence, reputation-based analysis, and that's all great. But I wouldn't rely solely on reputation-based analysis in your SOAR workflows. And ML is something that can look at something that maybe no one's ever looked at before and be able to tell if it's bad or good. So you don't need threat intelligence to be able to tell if it's bad. So this is our ML model, kind of a little overview. I'm not going to go into this a lot because we don't have a whole lot of time, because we want to get into the demo. We want to get into the good stuff. But we use the Floret natural language processing model with supervised learning. Supervised learning means that we have a classified data set of real-world data that's tagged by our analysts as their working incidents in the SOAR platform. And we give the model those trained samples, or those tagged samples. This one's malicious, this one's benign. We're giving that to the model as ground truth during the training process. So that would be the definition of supervised learning there. We do not use an LLM at this time during this workflow. There are some reasons for that. They're not maybe as explainable at this time. We'll get into that a little bit later. They're non-deterministic, and explanations of hallucinated verdicts might be a little convincing as well, coming from an LLM. And sometimes they just don't work at all. You give it a query and it just comes back, oh, request failed. Well, that's not good, is it? And I'm sure they'll get better over time. But the other thing about LLMs is that they're not super quick. You know, you give it a prompt and then you got to wait a little bit for tokens to come back. So, not to say that LLMs can't be used for this kind of workload, but we don't use it, and it's extra cost for us. You know, we'd rather just host an ML model that does a lot of this, and we don't have to pay any extra licensing cost, token cost, things like that. And I won't say that our opinion won't change later on. Once LLMs get better, maybe that's going to change. I can't say. But today, we don't use them in this workflow. So our ML model, the F1 scores on the malicious class 93.5, spam 94.2, and legitimate 94.5. The F1 score is kind of a good all-around indicator of accuracy and effectiveness of the model. So during training, the human classified training samples from analysts that the model actually saw was about 24,000. And then we do a train test split, which we're going to see in the code samples coming up here. We actually test the model on 6,021 samples, and then we're able to generate that confusion matrix there on the right-hand side. So that's just letting you see what kind of false positives and false negatives, where they're at. For example, here, this is the predicted side, so these were the ones, this number 53 here, would be the ones that were predicted spam but were actually malicious. So this horizontal line here, I don't know if you can see my, oh, you can't see my cursor. Laser pointer. Now you can see it, right? Perfect. So this horizontal line here is what we want to see the bigger numbers on, and the ones outside here we want to see lower numbers on towards that purple color. So that means this model is probably going to perform pretty decently in production. Of course, in a machine learning workload, you never know exactly how it's going to perform until you put that into production and start doing those feedback loops. But this is going to give you those indicators as you're training the model. You're acting like a data scientist in this case. As you're training the model, it's going to give you a good indication of whether it's going to work well in production. So then the model itself, Flora, it's a shallow neural net model for word representation learning, kind of like text embeddings or text classification is what we're using it for. And it's, some people would say it's not deep learning because it's shallow layers. It doesn't have a deep amount of layers in the model architecture. And it's all linear activation functions. There's no ReLU or sigmoid type of stuff in use here. And it's very efficient because of that. It doesn't take that much processing power even to train. I trained it on this laptop right here, if you can believe that. And it's not like you're trying to fine-tune an LLM where you're probably going to need a GPU. You know, I just used the i7 CPU in this laptop to do that. Another reason why we like this. And we can train on large sets of classified text, supervised learning, like I said before. I'm not going to go into this super deeply with the Floret fast text structure. Fast text, that is kind of that's like a project from Facebook. That's where this model kind of derived from. Floret is kind of it's like a fork of fast text. And what you do is you take a pre-processed version of your email, in this case. This is doing sentiment analysis in this particular example. But for us, this is malicious or legitimate that are going to be our classes or labels. And you put your email into here, subject and body text, and it gets word vectors out of that, word n-grams, we'll talk about those. And then it starts averaging those word vectors together, and it does some transformations, and it makes a prediction using one of the softmax functions here that it's configured to use, and it picks one of these classifications at the end when you're doing inferencing. So this one could be malicious, that one legitimate, and it will have a confidence rating for each of those when it comes out. So I'm not the best person to ask for all the math behind it. You can go read a bunch of white papers if you'd like. But now let's go into kind of the demo for building this model. Who's ready to do a demo? Yeah? So first off in the demo, we're going to be cleaning the data. This is what everybody talks about with data science, is a lot of the time spent is actually cleaning and organizing your data. So I'm actually going to end the slideshow, go into VS Code, and actually I didn't think about this, but I'm going to have to switch to a single display here because we have multiple displays at the moment. Because I can't really type and look like this at the same time. I can. All right. All y'all can see that now. So we're going to look at cleaning the data. And first, let's kind of look at the data that we've got. Of course, I'm not going to show our actual data. that we're training on at the state of North Dakota, but we do have some example data here. I put it under this training data directory. You guys want me to make this bigger on the screen? Can you see it? If you could, that'd be awesome. Okay. How's that? A little better? More? Good enough? So we have some CSV files here. I'm only using 2 of them, so you can see the ones I'm using here. A Nigerian fraud data set and a phishing email data set from Kaggle. And I did get it from Kaggle. Here is the user I got it from. So if you'd like to go play with those data sets, I'm giving them credit there. But let's look at our data set first. Sometimes you just got to look at your data before you start using it. This CSV file is 101 megabytes. Let's open it. And you can see this is some email data. Looks like they may have actually done some kind of pre-processing on it beforehand, which looks a little bit different than what our production data would look like. We're using a lot of raw emails at the state when we train this. So that's good. We got CSV files for our data. And part of this CSV is telling you what the verdict is. Was it malicious? Was it benign? And since we're doing a supervised training operation here, that's important. Your data sets have to be classified. All your records have to be classified. So here we're using pandas, NumPy, NLTK, and we're importing some stuff. And I will tell you too, this is all a Jupyter notebook. It might not look like a Jupyter notebook, but a little trick is, if you didn't know, if you put this little bit of text in a Python file and then close it out with another bit of text like that, it actually creates a cell in a Jupyter notebook. And if you have Jupyter installed in your environment and you're using something like VS Code, you can click on a section, Control Enter, and now it's actually executing it as if you were in Jupyter Lab, even though you're really not running Jupyter Lab, but you're running Jupyter underneath the hood in your Python environment. Okay? So now this is kind of some setup stuff, not too important. But if we look here, we're loading our CSV files for both data sets. And we're creating a pandas data frame. We're initializing that here. And then what we're doing here is we're actually normalizing these 2 data sets together. You ever have the situation where you've got 2 different data sets that represent the same thing, but the columns are different or whatever, but you need to get it normalized together so that it's all in the same plane, so to speak. And that's what we have here. So we're actually doing some normalization, and we're combining the subject and body together on the Nigerian fraud data set. And then we're loading the other phishing data set in there, and we're concatenating it together inside of that pandas data frame. And then we're trimming down the columns to only the columns that we need, because there are some other columns in there. I'm only interested in the combined text with the subject and the body and the label. That's all I care about. The label would be the classification. Is it malicious or benign, based on the person that was tagging the data? So let's run this cell now. And that finished pretty quickly. And now we're going to get into some pre-processing. When you deal with the ML models like Florit or Fast Text, and there's some other ones out there, I think Spacey has some out there too that's kind of like this. There might be better ones out there than what I'm using. That's totally possible. You need to pre-process your text. So we're downloading kind of a corpus here with NLTK. You see we got some regexes up here. We'll kind of get into that in a bit. And what we're doing here is we're removing stuff out of our emails, not just removing, but we're doing some transformations as well to make it more digestible and learnable from the model itself. So for example, this regex here is for like email addresses. This one's for hyperlinks, and that one's for numbers. And you can go way further into this than what I'm doing in this demo, but we're replacing those with placeholders. For example, we're doing a vectorized operation here with NumPy and pandas. And we're replacing every single email address with this email placeholder and then 2 spaces on the left and right. And we're using a regex engine to go in there, find and replace all this stuff. And we're doing this across 80,000 some records that we have in our training data set. And then we're replacing tabs, new lines, carriage returns, things like that, because we all want it in a single line. We don't really care about line breaks in this particular scenario. I haven't found them to be helpful with training. We replace links with this link placeholder, replace numbers with that number placeholder. And I'm removing any non-ASCII characters out of there too. I thought that helped when I was training our model. And then we're saving this to a pickle file. Who's heard of a pickle, a Python pickle? So you can actually serialize Python objects into, I think it's a binary format that you'd write on disk. And then you can recall it later and then create the same Python object again in memory. So the reason why I do this is because I've ran out of memory sometimes while training. In my WSL instance, this is all running in Windows Subsystem for Linux. I'm running Windows, I'm running WSL on top of that. And sometimes I've ran out of memory. Processes get killed for the Jupyter stuff. So then I can just pick up where I left off by loading this in. So let's go run this vectorized operation for the pre-processing. And that's not all the pre-processing we're going to do. That's only part of it. And I'm going to let that run. It's going to take a little bit. But the vectorized operations make it a lot better. You guys know what NumPy is written in? It's a Python module, but most of it's probably written in C, right? And that's the reason why we're able to get some of these performance gains out of the vectorization operations, is because NumPy is calling into native code that's loaded in. All right, so now we've done that part. Let's see what our data looks like now. So now we see, look at that. So now we see some placeholders in there. Might be a little bit hard for you guys to see. But we have some pre-processing done. And we can see the labels over here. 0, I believe, means benign. 1 would be malicious. Okay? Now let's go down to the next part of our pre-processing. So we're actually doing some tokenization here, and this is a function that does that tokenization. It's removing stop words, and we're using NLTK to load in a list of stop words. And it's words in English like conjunctions, things that don't really make a lot of semantic sense for what you're talking about. So we're actually removing those stop words, and we're removing punctuation as well from all the emails. because that doesn't prove to help all that much. And then we're just joining everything on space delimited words. Those are the ones that we're actually going to train on, okay? So now we're going to call that function and apply the tokenization in a vectorized way across all of our training data. This is a little bit slow because this is all, Python loops, things like that. You can't really deduce that down into something super fast in the native code of NumPy. But let's go ahead and do that. And while that's running, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup in the data too once we have some of this done. We're dropping any duplicate emails. Yes, question.
Would you ever use headers in your data?
I have not.
Okay. Just subject and message body? Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
We'll get into a little bit of that later. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster here. Just got to wait for this to finish. Anybody else have any questions so far? Still running. We got time.
What's the benefit of building your own model to do this versus using a commercial model that processes like millions of emails for their ML training? Is it just a cost savings thing, or I guess just some feedback on why you decided to build your own?
That's part of it, is cost savings. We can run it on our own infrastructure, but we also train it on our own email. Now, some vendors might train on your organization's emails, but a lot of people don't want to train on their own and send it to a vendor. But I'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end, about commercial solutions. And this can even complement a commercial solution. All right, good question though. So now we've done our tokenization, and now this is going to be a bit of a faster operation. We're going to drop anything that's duplicate, and we're going to drop anything that's just not existing. So if there's any empty emails, okay? And now we're actually going to create the training files that the model is going to use to train on and test on. So we're going to create a floret file here. And the floret file format for training that you pipe into the model, you start with label with the two dunders there. And then you get our mapping. So remember we had integers for legit and phishing. We just map those to what we want our friendly classification name to be. And then this is the email itself. Then we do a line break. And that just keeps on going. And this is kind of interesting here. We have our train test split set up, where we have our email, we got our labels, and our test size. So this means that we're training on 80% of the data, and we're testing on 20%. And then we're setting a random state because we're doing some shuffling, randomizing the order of our data, okay? In random state, that's just a random seed for the random number generator. I set it to 42 for obvious reasons, okay? And then that's going to train, test, and split, or it's going to do a split of our data. So then it's going to put our emails that we're going to be training on in these variables here, and it's going to come back as a tuple, and it's going to be expanded into these 4 values, okay? Then we're going to create 2 files. One of those files is going to use the training data that we're going to be training the model on. That's the data the model is actually going to see. There's a difference because this file is going to be the testing data, the data that the model has not seen, but we're going to use to evaluate. So let's run this. And that runs pretty quick. And let's go look at our testing files here. So we have the training output text file. We got 100 megabytes. And look at this. This is the data format that's actually going to be sent to the model for training. This is what the model is going to see. That's how it's going to set its weights each epoch. We have 64,000 samples that we're actually training on. The testing output. This is a lot smaller of a file, but this is what we're actually going to be evaluating the model on to see where do we have false negatives, false positives. Very important. Okay? So now this is what we've all been waiting for. We're going to train the model. We've done all that work to get our data ready for training. So here we see that we're actually importing Florit. That's the model itself, and we're doing a supervised training operation. And we're inputting the training output. So that's the file I just showed you with 64,000 samples. In this case, we're doing 1 epoch. So an epoch is how many times does it see all of your training data. So if I did, for example, usually a better thing to start out with is like 3 epochs. The learning rate, this is another hyperparameter, if you've heard of those in the machine learning world. This is how much the model changes after seeing each sample, okay? So I'm going to set that to 0.2. And then the word n-grams. We talked about n-grams a little bit in the beginning, but this is how it actually does the text parsing when you make an inference and when you train. So this is how it's going to learn all the words inside of all your email. So it's going to look at all the email training samples. And since I set 5 n-grams, it's going to look for different combinations of different words to try to extract out the semantic meaning from those. This is powerful. Word n-grams and even character n-grams, but I haven't configured any character n-gram hyperparameters, only word n-grams. And I set it to verbose so that we can kind of see what it's doing, and I'm setting the same random number generator seed value of 42. Learn from my mistakes. Don't just not set a seed value, because if you train a model, it's good, it's working out well for you, and then you try to do it again and it's different, and now you can't reproduce what you just did. That kind of sucks. And then we get our, the test label. So this is our test data. We're running the validation of the model after it's created on our testing output. And we're going to write the results to a text file. So let's do it. Now we're actually doing a training operation. It's read 10 million words. It's going. This is how many it extracted out. And we have 2 labels, the legit and malicious. Cool, so now it finished. That was pretty quick, wasn't it? Let's go to our training output. That's the wrong file. Testing results. So we can see we've got a precision recall value for legit. So this is the legit label of about 98%. This one's 98.7. We got an F1 score of 98.4. That's kind of your overall value that you would look at. Overall, how well is it doing? And it computes that for each of the classifications that you have, okay? So precision and recall, if you wanted to minimize the number of false negatives, you'd want to increase your recall value. And if you want to decrease the amount of false positives, you want to increase the precision value. Okay, that's what you'd want to target. So we got that out of the way. We did some training. Let's save our model to disk. Looks like that happened. That's good. And now we can actually see what hyperparameters we train with. So this actually extracts all the hyperparameters out. I didn't define every single hyperparameter, by the way. Some of these are defaults. So you can see in here all the different hyperparameters and their values. That can be good if you're coming back and training later. And you're coming back and you're evaluating, you're tweaking things, because you're going to do that. It's not just going to work for you the first try. The numbers look pretty good on the first try here, but we'll kind of get into why that is later. So now if we want to do some evaluation of this model, now we can generate our confusion matrix like you saw before. So I'm going to go a little bit faster here. Let's import some of this, and then we're going to import our testing output file. Then we're going to import our classes and our emails. So we have some regexes here that are, let's see. We're going to get the email subject and body out and the classifications, and we're going to put them into a format that we can kind of understand, right? Where we can evaluate. We're going to load the ML model that we just made into memory. And now we're going to run some predictions across that. Okay. Now we've ran some evaluation predictions. And now we're going to build a confusion matrix based on that. Oh, what happened here? Model's not defined. I'm just going to rerun this. Nothing like a live demo, right? There we go. So now based on all those samples that we brought in, and this is some of the training data, right, that we want to figure out, okay, where are our false negatives and your false positives as we trained. And now we printed out a confusion matrix that kind of tells you, okay, we had 8,466 phishing predicted, where that was the actual label. They were actually phishing. Those were correctly predicted. And then we had 91 where we predicted legit, but they were actually phishing. So those would be false negatives. Those are what we want to avoid. And that number is pretty low. That means we're doing pretty good. Okay? So now we built the confusion matrix. And now if you wanted to pick out any of these false negatives and see what did that email actually say, you can actually do that by finding your false negatives by doing some enumeration here. And now we have an array of false negative predictions. So now we can see every single email that was a false negative. Very helpful when troubleshooting and going back, retraining your model, because you're going to have to do this a few times. Go back and retrain. And now, what's really, really cool is we can use something called the Lime Text Explainer. Yeah, you heard that right. We have explainable AI right here. So we're using something called Lime. It's all open source. You can go look at it. But what we're doing here is this is actually part of the source code of what we have deployed in production. It's close to it, not exact. But what we're doing is we're taking the email in question. Let's see, where is it in here? Lime Text Explainer. We're explaining the prediction. Here it is. So we call Lime Text Explain. We pass in the email, and we tell it to take 5,000 samples and run basically 5,000 different inferences on the ML model. And it changes the input email a little bit each of those 5,000 times. And what it can do then is it can tell you which words actually contributed the most to the predicted class. So this thanks, it's pretty high because it's a non-negative number. The negative numbers or low numbers are the ones that contributed the least in the other way to that particular prediction. So can be helpful, not a silver bullet, but it can be helpful when evaluating your model. Okay? So then you might want to go back, retrain your model again, and this is where you probably want to take your hyperparameters and tweak them a little bit. You might want to try adjusting the learning rate down a little bit or up a little bit. This is kind of an empirical science, if you will, where it's not necessarily a proven method to get the results that you want. It's all through experimentation. A lot of it is through experimentation. It's a very empirical process. You might want to have more epochs so that it sees your training data more times. You might want to mess with the number of n-grams that you have. Usually in my experience, going higher is better, and then it plateaus out. But what really matters too is how many samples you have. The more samples you have, usually the better, if they're high quality samples, okay? And as you get higher in the amount of samples, some of these hyperparameter values, in my experience, are a little less touchy. They don't matter quite as much when you get more data in there. So I'll kind of show you, I did a bunch of different iterations here of training the model. And you can see, I'm not going to show all of these to you, but I adjusted epochs, 25 epochs down to 5, and then you get a little bit of a difference. But we have a lot of training samples here, 80,000 plus, so you can see that it's not really changing too much. But then you get down here, I took this same model that we just trained today, technically not the same. I trained it with slightly different hyperparameters earlier, but I took an auto-tuned version of the model. It does have an auto-tuning feature for hyperparameters that I didn't show you. And I ran this model against our NDIT data set, the emails that are actually classified by analysts, and the results are very poor. Okay, so our synthetic benchmarks of looking at this, very promising. 98% plus F1 scores, really, really well scoring. We put it against real world data. Doesn't look so hot, does it? F1 score of 32% now, instead of 98 plus. And that's because if you look at this data set, this particular data set has emails that don't really look like what we would have in production at NDIT. So these are example training sets for this presentation, but you wouldn't want to use this for a real model that's used in production because this doesn't really look like real emails, right? So data quality really, really matters. And at this point, we've trained the model, we've evaluated. Yes, Zane?
I was going to ask, is there a certain level of precision and recall that you're shooting for in your models before it can go through and be added to the list of things that mark things malicious or not in your environment?
You know, we don't have a set target, and it's been a while since we trained ours, because we don't auto-train, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's been a little while. It's probably been almost a year since we trained this one, but I was mostly looking at F1 score at the time. But since we have quarantine, where we're denying their request to release quarantine, if it's malicious, you kind of have both ways there, where false negatives and false positives, they both can't really be high, because we have both sides of that coin that we have to optimize for. So we probably would try to optimize F1 more so, and then secondarily probably recall to reduce false negatives. False negatives probably are still more damaging. So I hope that answers your question. Not right now. No. So for the sake of time, it took a little bit longer than I thought. Sorry about that. I'm going to go back, switch my screens around. All right. So we're going to talk about productionizing the model real quick here. We created our own fast API service that hosts this model in one of our internal servers. And we use our source solution to make an API call out to this service and say, here's this email, what do you think of it? And then we use it kind of in that workflow that way. So we created a fast API service for that. If you wanted to deploy something like this in your environment, you could probably use like MLflow. There's probably a couple other third-party solutions out there that you could use for that, but we just decided to create our own service because why not? We like doing that. And a really important thing is to ensuring that the pre-processing logic that you saw, where we do data transformation and removing duplicates, all that kind of stuff needs to be the same in production as it was when you train the model that you're using in production. That's very, very important that you don't drift in that way for having different logic for pre-processing. And the same dependency versions for Florit, for NLTK, and some of your other frameworks that you're pulling in and importing. You want to have all that be the same as it is when you train your model as it is in production. If you hear the term ML ops, that's probably what they're talking about. It's kind of like DevOps, but for ML. You're making sure that all this stuff is the same in the whole life cycle. And then implementing explainability. Lime is what I showed you briefly, and then Shupe is another one that is probably a little bit more thorough than Lime. But it's good to have some explainability that you can show your analysts if needed, or to go back and say, well, why did it say this was malicious when it wasn't, or vice versa. Having some idea with the explainability is good. And we're implementing feedback loops from analysts when it's in production. This is important too, because how do you know that you don't have false negatives in production, where it closes out the alert when somebody reports an email, but it actually was malicious? That's no good. So the only way to really combat that is to have feedback loops where the analysts will basically alert you saying, hey, I got this email that came through an automated workflow that opens up, let's say, 10 random alerts that were closed by ML. Was this correct? And then senior analysts can go through there, classify it, and then bring the feedback back to us and say, hey, it closed some of these out when it shouldn't have. Maybe let's consider retraining and looking for some of these cases in the future, seeing how we can do that a little bit better. Do we need to have a bit of a class imbalance when we train, having more malicious or more benign emails in the set? Because that could matter in that case. That may be a potential way to remedy those issues. So having that automatic feedback loop for analysts is key. And then anything that an analyst actually touches, put their ground truth, so to speak, determination of what that email is, their verdict, associate that with the alert so that you can build to your training data set later. So when you train later, now you've got more samples of pretty accurate data from your analysts. That's what we have been working on the past year, is building up that data set again. That's absolutely required, in my opinion, if you want to attempt something like this. You need to have data from your analysts, the people that really know your environment. So why not just auto-train the model? And that's because of model drift, right? Because if you keep retraining, you keep adding more samples, but it can actually degrade the model. And we've seen this happen, where models get worse and worse over time, potentially. Maybe then they get better a little bit, and then they get worse. Sometimes you just got to take a data science approach to training your models, where you're going in there and you're questioning, well, is our class balances actually correct? Should we be loading up our training data with more malicious or cutting out some benign, or vice versa, depending on what issues we're seeing in production? So taking a data science approach there and looking at your pre-processing logic, do you need to change that? Is there email banners? Hey, this is an outside email that shows up on every single email. Is that throwing off your predictions? Do you need to cut that out with pre-processing? So yeah, that's what we kind of learned about model training, is cleaning the data, building the models a little bit easier. Unless you're the scientist that's building for it, then that's probably kind of a difficult job. Data quality is everything, as we went through with the NDIT data that we inferenced against, we tested against with the model that we built here, or something very similar with the training data that we have here during this presentation. Didn't turn out very well because that data didn't represent very good what we actually see in production. So outside third-party data sets that differ wildly might not be a good resource. So then how can you practically start doing this? I read this book, at least some of it, Machine Learning by Andrei Burkov. Got it here. This is a pretty good book, especially when it talks about like feature engineering. Help me understand some of those things a little bit better. I'm not a super good ML engineer. I don't do it 40 hours a week every single day, ML. But reading that helped me a little bit. And SANS Sec 595, who does SANS courses here, GIAC exams and stuff like that? Sec 595 was pretty good for this kind of stuff. Then you're gonna need some time. Took me 10 plus hours to get this all ready, plus more hours of our team building the scaffolding that it needs to put into production, that fast API service. You're gonna need some software development skills, and you're gonna have to start tracking data on your reported fishes. The alerts that your analysts are working, they're gonna need to classify them, because you've gotta use that data later when you wanna train. So where's kind of the defense in depth in all of this? As you might be wondering, one ML model is not gonna be enough for you. Natural language processing isn't gonna catch every single BEC, CRED harvester. There's gonna be things that it misses, because it's not looking at the email headers like Zane mentioned here. If we're only looking at subject and email body text. So a multimodal approach, and that's an approach that even some vendors take too for commercial solutions, right? They got multiple ML models or scoring systems in play to determine if something is malicious. It's not just going to rely on a natural language processing verdict, kind of like what we're doing with Florit. So you could have a URL prediction model, not threat intel based necessarily, that's involved a rules engine like Sublime Security. That would be a nice thing as well to have as kind of a layer of defense there that has lots of predefined rules that can fire and say, yeah, this doesn't look good. Even if your ML model doesn't catch it, but your ML model might catch something that Sublime doesn't. So that's where defense in depth comes in. In severity scoring, we take into account DKIM, DMARC, SPF, pass, fail, certain keywords that we've defined that matched in the email, return path header matches, the ML verdict from the NLP, which is our Florit model that we just trained, attachment analysis, hyperlink, TI verdicts, threat intel is what I mean by that. Your enrichment tools that you're reaching out to for enrichment in your SOAR. Those are things that we take into account and what you could take into account as well, and then build a severity score based on that. Right now we have a really linear model of doing that where we got thresholds, multipliers all over the place to compute a score and see if it matches a threshold, is it over or under. But you'll see when you try to tune that, it's easy to tune too much stuff out or not as much stuff as you want to tune out when you mess with those thresholds and multipliers, because it's very linear. It doesn't have a lot of non-linearity to it. There's not a lot of dimensionality as to how that whole thing works with the severity score of what we built and are using today. So I would love to do this in our environment where we take some of that data, where we pull out features. If you hear of feature engineering in ML, you pull out, is DKIM passing? Yes, no, that's a feature. You put that into a tabular data set and you start training on that. And then you can actually use that in conjunction with your natural language processing to have even a better idea, potentially, of if something is good or bad. So are we way over on time here? A little bit? Should we keep going? Yeah.
You're the last one of the day, so.
Okay, all right. That's what I figured. So what if the user clicks the link? We don't really want to be like this guy over here, right? We do all of our cybersecurity efforts, we put the armor on, and you get an arrow in the face, right? Where somebody clicks on a phishing link. It's still gonna happen. That's what we have to come to terms with, is that it's still gonna happen, and we need more defense in depth. Even if we have all this stuff made with even XGBoost models, we got third-party tools running, commercial solutions, somebody's still gonna click that and it's still gonna put something on your endpoint. It's still gonna cause damage at some point. But if we wanna prevent some of that damage, we gotta look at other alerts too for our SOC. UEBA, inbox rule creation alerts, and some SOAR workflows that will help more quickly reset credentials for compromised accounts. We gotta look at what of compromised accounts, what's the best alerts that we have, the most high fidelity alerts, the ones that are least likely to be false positives and most likely to be true positives. Those are some examples. Azure Risky Users is a good one. They're pretty high fidelity alerts. That kind of goes with the UEBA. And the other need that we have for kind of more commercial solutions, we need to be proactive. What I'm mentioning here is a lot of people are only relying on a user reporting an email as phishing. But that's being reactive from a user level. We want to be proactive. And that's where we kind of get into our commercial solutions too. I'm sure you could build a solution that does some of these things. It'd probably take a little while. It'd be expensive. But you got Microsoft Defender Quarantine. Sometimes it's a little overzealous, misses some threats entirely, but it's better than nothing. We like to have it. And you got gateway-based email scanning tools, pointing your MX records to a gateway. Something like Proofpoint would do that. API-based email scanning, where you kind of have a delayed scan of mail that comes into users' inboxes through an API. Proofpoint does that too. Abnormal does that, Iron Scales. If you're gonna implement something like that, that's probably the one I'd recommend, because if your email gateway goes down and that secure gateway was your only gateway that your MXs are pointing to, now your mail flows down, right? And the CIA triad is a thing, and availability is part of that triad. So that's one thing I caution on if we're looking at blocking, well, not blocking, but putting a secure mail gateway in the flow of your email where there's maybe not a good high availability solution there. So what did we learn today? We don't necessarily need LLMs to do email security. You can use them. Some vendors are using them, which is great, but you don't necessarily need them to do email security. And we learn how to build and tune an ML model in your environment. Is it practical for everybody to do this? No, it's not. But if you have an engineering team in your SOC, you don't have a lot of money to go out and buy $250,000 or whatever it costs solution, and you need to build something, this is great. This is a good way to do that. Or if you have those expensive solutions, but they miss some stuff, you want to have some defense in depth layer to go behind that. This is another way to do that too if you have the engineering talent. But you're still going to need high fidelity alerts tuned in your environment, and you're going to need an incident response plan. You got to have SOC triage, right? And you should be looking at ways to be proactive, not just relying on somebody to click report phish, but to be able to get ahead of that. So this is the GitHub repo where you can see the code for training the model and doing the evaluation. Use at your own risk. You will have to change the code if you want to use it in your environment. It's not going to just work out of the box, but it is a starting point if you wanted to do something like this. So with that, I know we're a little bit over time, but I will take questions if we have the time to do so.
I was gonna ask real quick, when you're going through and your analysts they're only seeing the things that are above the threshold? Are they ever going back through and reviewing things that were classified as a false positive, or they don't need to look at it and they don't get it in front of their eyes? Are they ever going back through and looking at those things that were classified and looking at that?
Yeah, they do. And what we're doing too, we had this in the past, but we're building it again, is that whole review workflow where automation every 7 days or whatever is going to pick out some auto-closed alerts and say, go look at these. And that's really the main way that you do something like that. And sometimes analysts will be going looking through stuff that was closed out too, just for their own curiosity. And if they find something, they'll reclassify it in the SOAR, and it pushes that verdict out, and now we have it for training data in the future. But yeah, did that kind of answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
So first off, excellent presentation demo. It was really,
Thank
really
you.
fascinating. So when we're looking at the ML that you put together, right, or just the code you put together, could we use that as a framework? And I was taking a look at the Git a little bit. That can be done for any email, or would we still have to customize the email, the headers, to match the specific like labels, if that makes sense?
So you're asking if the logic in there can be applied to any
Correct.
email? Not really, because I'll give you one example. In your organization, if you have a different banner than somebody else's organization, where the banner is like, this came from an outside source, be careful before you click, or
Right.
whatever it says. If that's different for your org, you're going to have to tune the pre-processing logic a little bit to get that to work more optimally for you. And you might have to clean the data a little bit differently. But the base layer of what's going on there, the base idea would work for any email. Headers don't really matter in this case unless you're trying to do natural language processing on headers, which I'm guessing wouldn't be very effective.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess my second question, what is the future with this? Would you say from like your personal side of things, what would you like to add and make changes for as we're kind of continuing the threat landscape with email security?
Well, I would like to go through again and retrain it, get better pre-processing in there, get more of our sample data in there that we've actually trained with our analysts. They're doing an awesome job going in there and labeling things. I want to get more data in there, and I also want to look at things outside of the natural language processing realm. I want to look at even other commercial solutions to put in front of that. And I'd love to look at XGBoost for doing that tabular data representation of other features, pulling out other features. I would love to play with that and see if we can make things better.
How long did it take you to set up this whole thing?
Good
Just out of
question.
curiosity, like if I wanted to try to set it up myself, like just getting an idea how long it took you.
I think I took like 12 hours to train the model. The first model iterations were done in probably a matter of 6 hours. But the rest of the model, or to make it better, probably like 12 hours. And then you're talking weeks of time, probably a couple of months, to actually build the fast API service and put that into production, get the playbook and the SOAR all figured out. So you're looking at months to get rolling on this. Now, if you've got a really good agentic coding assistant, you could probably build the fast API service a little faster. No AI was actually used to build any of this. This is all human written code.
And then in terms
yeah.
of the maintenance after, is it just pretty much the analysts are labeling the emails coming in afterwards. So
Yep.
pretty low maintenance after you get it built.
Pretty low maintenance, but I would say if you're really, really doing it the best way you can, it's not as low maintenance as you think, because you got to go retrain. And you got to go put your data science hat on and say, okay, is this model really effective, or can we do better? And how do we do better? And how do we train this to be better and evaluate if it can go into production and make that switch? And then deploy your new service code into production with your new pre-processing code. So there's maintenance there. There's engineering work. It's definitely not maintenance free once you finish your first iteration.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Do we have anything else? Well, thank you, Jaden, for the email talk. Also, thank you to all of our speakers and attendees for Dakotacon. We couldn't have a convention without all of you here. So, really, thank you. Please give Jaden a round of applause.
Thanks for staying late, everybody.
Alrighty. Well, I hope you all appreciated all the talks today and whatever else you guys have going on in Madison. Thank you for coming.